Today on this episode of the Brain Surgeon's Take, we will be discussing Roadmap to UMiami's New Century with President of the University of Miami and CEO of UHealth, Joe Echevarria. Learn about the University of Miami's rich history of excellence in both academics and athletics, as well as regional, state, national, and global advancement. With its centennial rapidly approaching, where is the institution headed? What are its major priorities? And how do we get there together? Much more on this podcast episode. Welcome back, everyone. Here's my take on President Joe Echevarria. He is the perfect person to lead UMiami into its centennial and beyond. As a decorated alum and experienced CEO, Joe not only understands how far the university has come, but also how much work remains to be done. The U has a rich tradition of excellence in multiple academic arenas, including medicine, business, law, the sciences, and humanities, with numerous graduates having become world leaders. The U has also served as a beacon of positive change throughout South Florida and beyond. Of course, the U has also set the standard for athletic domination, highlighted by their football, baseball, and basketball programs. As a faculty member here at the U, I loved this interview. Hearing the ambitious goals set out by President Echevarria only amplified the pride I have for my institution. The priorities of continued growth, advancement, and leadership will position the University of Miami at the forefront of higher education in the United States. We clearly have exciting times ahead, inspired by incredible pioneers willing to push the envelope. Listen up as we discuss Roadmap to UMiami's New Century. Check it out. Hey, Joe, how are you?
Great, Rick. Great to see you, my friend.
It's great to have you on the podcast. And with the centennial of the University of Miami coming up, wanted to delve into the past, present, and future and what your goals are coming up.
Sure. You want me to talk a little bit about the centennial?
Sure. I wanted to start by saying that with the centennial approaching, what would you say has been the most important achievement in the last 100 years, top 2 or 3 achievements of the university, in your opinion?
Wow. It's a long time, right? So a little context for those who may be listening. So I've been a part of the institution for 50 of the 99 years we've been in existence, because I walked on this campus, Rick, in August of 1974 for the very first time. At the time, I didn't realize it was 49 years old, and I don't know if that would have made any difference to me, quite frankly, as a 17-year-old. But if you mark the history that at least I've observed, because it's hard for me to speak to some of the things that may have happened in the past, and I'm sure there's glorious things that happened, man. But there's a couple of things that stand out that happened under different leadership structures, and I'm going to do them real quickly, Rick, not necessarily in any order of import.
Sure.
But if you look at the institution that you and I are proud members of today, it's an academic research institution. That was a decision consciously made, I believe, by Tad Foote back in the early 80s, when he basically said, we need to be a research university, not just a university. That was a conscious decision that was made literally about maybe a little less than 50 years ago. And that dramatically changed the trajectory of the institution, culminating in us becoming a member of the AAU, which is one of the prestigious organizations of all leading research institutions. And that is driven in large part by what we do at the medical school in terms of our basic science research and some of our non-funded research we do there. So that was a big thing in my mind. Another transformative thing that was done was when Donna Shalala, in her presidency, decided to not just have a medical school, but decided to have a large clinical enterprise treating patients directly. And she went about purchasing what we today call the Tower, but back then was Cedars, the old Cedars Hospital. For those of us of Miami those days, that was Cedars. And while we had Bascom and we had some of the inmates lead stuff in the eye side, the ocular side, we really didn't have a large clinical presence in South Florida at all. And our medical school was basically partnered purely with Jackson purely with Jackson. There was no other clinical opportunity for people like yourself today. That turns out to put us in one of the leading academic health systems in the United States. That was a choice that Donna made in her presidency. And I'm covering the landscape of who we are as an institution, right? I did research on the academic side. I did the academic health system. So I'm going to talk now about athletics, okay? You can mark the change in the institution with the first football championship, which happens in 1983. And what that really did was it put the institution's brand on the map. That famous U that we throw around that everybody in the world knows about was really made famous by athletic accomplishments, quite frankly. There's not a country, in my Deloitte life, in my prior life, I traveled the world for business. There wasn't a place I could go to. It didn't matter where it was. It was in Asia. It was in anywhere in Europe, anywhere in Africa, where somebody didn't know the U, that logo. And I could throw my hands up and they knew exactly what I was talking about. And that split U, Rick, was actually created back in the early 70s. Just wasn't famous, but it was created. It was on their helmets, the football team. It was created. The split U was all about, Rick, the intersection of our athletes, which was one half of the U, and the other half was supposed to be fans. And it was supposed to be how they're joined together. That was, and a PR firm did it. Lipoff did it for us back in the 70s. And it just took off. Why? Because we were great at something, just like Sylvester has taken off because we are great at it. And when I think about who we are today, we'd be hard pressed to be what we are without those three things happening, in my professional experience, at least in my humble opinion. And I had nothing to do with any of them happening. Okay? Nothing.
I mean, it's a great summary. And I think you brought it up best because people always ask, why do these major universities care about athletics so much? And how do the athletics get intertwined with the brand, the university, and ultimately with the academics? And I think you said it best. I think that the University of Miami has always been great academically, but the success athletically amplifies the brand, draws even better students, better faculty, and ultimately amplifies the academics. Is that safe to say?
It's well said. And I'll give you a corollary of some of our peers. We're an AAU school. We're in the ACC, which essentially are, for the most part, with one or two exceptions, all AAU schools, just like the Big Ten. Stanford, as an example. When they had a player and their football team had a really great season, they realized, even for them, that athletics really mattered and how everything got better. The ability to attract faculty, student involvement, donors, the brand. And they did a study on it, actually, to decide whether they should continue investing in athletics. And they said, absolutely, we need to continue. Because you said it perfectly. That's what it does. It's just part of who we are. And I remind people, those are our students that are competing. Those are not other people. They are mine, your students, okay? Whether it's the Olympic sports, we had an Olympic gold medalist, okay? People talk about the big sports that we know about, but the reason they talk about us is because of that U. So you're right. You're exactly right, Rick. That to me is what it is. It's brand lifting, brand enhancing, and we all benefit. If I took that U logo off of your white coat, you'd be less recognizable. Okay.
Very true. Very true. It's a proud logo to have.
Logo to have. It's a brand. It's fantastic.
Looking ahead, having gone over what you thought were the three biggest pillars of the last 50 years, what would you say are the greatest opportunities for advancement looking into the new centennial?
Yeah, so you know this because you're of us, so our actual 100th birthday is April 8th of 2025. That's the actual day. So to me, and again, as having been part of it, I actually think one of the things we can do is, now that we've got all the underpinnings, we've got all the pillars well established now it's about pursuing greatness in everything we do. Because we don't have to do the building blocks anymore. That's been done for us, okay? Getting people like you to come to our institution, we needed to have those things in place. But now what I need to do is figure out, well, what else can I do with somebody of your stature to help the institution be great. So we're now pursuing what I call greatness, and people sometimes get offended and say, aren't we great already? And I said, okay, let's be greater. You can decide how you want to frame it, okay? And so we're really want to define ourselves as great. And great is legacy building that's transformational, that requires external validation. And how do you get there? Well, one of the easiest steps or most important steps, not really easy, is you really have to believe in continuous improvement in the pursuit of excellence. And you got to do that every single day. That's the mastery. That's you as a brain surgeon mastering your craft, right? That's you doing that. That's a stepping stone to greatness. So having somebody like you on our faculty is a stepping stone to greatness. Having more of you is the next stepping stone to greatness, and being very focused on that. So one of the things we've had to do is create capital, because somebody of your stature, or many of the others that we have, you have requirements to come. You're not coming without certain things because you want to be great at what you do. And those things usually require capital. They're not free. And we've gotten really good at creating capital. Now, that is the next building block we have done, is we have gotten really good at creating capital for the institution to invest back. So I think that's where we're about pursuing greatness now in everything we do. And if we could start that journey, it's going to be a next terrific 100 years. I'm sure I won't be there for half this time. Okay. Because people like you tell me that's not really biologically possible.
I mean, along those lines, how fiscally sound is the university? It sounds like where you're going with it is very, but how fiscally sound is the university, and really any particularly exciting fundraising or endowment initiatives on the horizon?
Yeah, so let me talk about fiscal soundness, and don't let me forget to get to the campaigns, the fundraising, and where we're going in that. But like what I like to do is we have earned the right now, because we have figured out, and I'm going to start to use some technical terms that are technical to the field that I come from, that won't be technical for you. We have figured out how to expand margin. Okay, as an institution, we have figured out how to go from a negative margin, which basically means you spend more than you have, to expanding margin so that we can do the things that are required. And we did that principally by really focusing on patient safety, quality, and experience in the clinical enterprise and in the teaching enterprise. And we really got out of the way of our world-class faculty and clinicians like yourself. And we said, what do you need to be the best version of you? And what do you not need to be? And we went on this journey, and we have gone from being a bottom decile performer to a top decile performer in all the things that matter. Okay. So now we're a $6 billion enterprise, and we sit in the top decile of margin creation so that we can go do the things that we need to do. So we can go recruit the best faculty that we can compensate the best people that we have. We can build facilities that we need to build, and not rely on people giving us the money, because nothing is free. So when you get contributions or donations or philanthropy, you have to do something very specific with it. Okay. The donor kind of drives what that's about. So it's always good for that to be gravy, not the core. Okay. We used to rely on that as our source of capital. Not anymore. Now it's gravy. Now it's on top. So the campaigns, to the question you just asked. So we're finishing, we do decade-long campaigns, but let me give you some easy math. So we're about to finish the Ever Brighter campaign, and that's just a label. And that campaign started 10 years ago. 10 years ago. And it had a goal of getting to $2 billion over 10 years. And we're probably going to, and it will close on the centennial, basically. We'll probably get to about 2.5 would have been what we would get to. And simple for me, I think of cash. How much cash did it turn into? It turned into about 1.8 billion. But that took us 10 years to do. We do that now. We create that amount, almost 3x ourselves now.
Wow.
So now when you do this, we're 3x that number now. So what we do as a collective, all of us, all of you, we create 3x that number. Before we created no X that number. Now your team is at 3X that number. So now it really is gravy. Now it really is gravy. Now we can actually take and do meaningful programs that we otherwise couldn't have done, and we can focus our philanthropy on that. So the next program that we're going to run is going to be around the investments we need to pursue greatness very specifically. We want to define that. I need you to help me define what that means in neuro. You define what that means in neuro. You tell me what that means. Then I need to go out and get the funding for the things that you need. And then we're going to do endowed scholarships because we're very expensive as a proposition. I don't mean the patient side, the student side. Miami's gotten more expensive since COVID, right? And we need to move where we create a much more model that's more sensitive to our students and our pricing so that they can afford to come here, because we want the best and the brightest. And sometimes the best and the brightest can afford it, and sometimes they cannot. And we are at a very high price point for all of our students, whether it's the medical school, the law school, the business school, it doesn't matter. We have a high price point. So we're going to move to creating endowed scholarships. So what don't we have? We don't have a big endowment. Our endowment's like 1.7 billion, which is below the median for AAU schools. I think of the 69 US schools, right, we rank 65 out of 69 in the size of our endowment.
Wow.
We are very small, okay? Which means we have to earn our way through the process, okay? And that's what all of you have done, quite frankly, have turned us into that. That's why we can go do endowed scholarships. That's why we can talk about changing the clinical footprint downtown, which is probably a $5 billion endeavor. Think about Sylvester, Bascom, the Tower, and PAC, or the Desai, the main clinical enterprises, right? They need to be renovated, changed, and redone. That's a $5 billion price tag. We can do Doral, Solomia, Kendall, Deerfield, North. We're going to do all of that. Probably a $7 billion journey. And we have earned the capacity to do those things now. And then we'll do naming gifts, like we did Ken Griffin on the Cancer Research Building, right? To add to Sylvester. Yeah, he gave us $50 million. That was a great earning. See, then it was gravy. But we started building that building without that gift. We didn't wait for the gift to build a building. That's the difference.
I'm glad you brought up the college tuition, because I was going to ask you, college tuitions are going up nationwide, and you're right, we are at the upper level of those college tuitions, and it becomes really prohibitive for a lot of good students. So I'm glad you mentioned about the endowed scholarships to allow super qualified students who may not have the means to still come here. And I think that's a very, very important point that you brought up that I was going to get to. Besides everything you said, which sounds amazing, and all the goals, what would you say is the biggest challenge that you and your team are facing as you continue to strive for greatness?
I think that one of the things that all humans do, we're all invested in the status quo, all of us. And that's why change is always hard, because we're invested in the status quo. It's what we're used to. It's what we're comfortable with. So imagining that you can be great at it, or greater, pick which other verb you want to use, sometimes a little hard, okay, to believe that you can get there and do the things that are required. We're not here to do the things that are easy. We are here to do the things that are hard. What you do every day, you're not there for the easy things, right? You're there for the hard things. That's what your life's training was about. That's what you do every day. The easy cases, 90% of that maybe can be done in a community system somewhere, right? When they come to you, they're coming for the hard thing. The same thing applies to everything else we do. So when I say we need to try to be we need to improve. Let's do a little bit more and do it a little bit better. To some, that's hard. I say, yes, it is hard. That's why we're here. So I think it's the culture more than anything else. Believing in ourselves. I think down at the health system, where I keep referring to you because that's where you're sitting at. 5 years ago, I think we had a very different personality than we have today as an institution in the health system. Yeah, because we went on a journey led by all of you, and we became really great. But when we started that journey, Rick, I can remember all the naysayers when I first walked out there, and all the things I was told about why it couldn't be done, and I didn't understand it. And they were just a product of experiences, that's all. That's all. Not anymore. Now we're anxious to what comes next. What now? That's a culture change. That has to happen to the entire institution. And it starts by appreciating our faculty. See, I'm a mission-obsessed person, me personally. Doesn't matter. And for me, the mission here is not complicated. It's our students, it's our patients, and it's our research, driven by our faculty. So therefore, we must invest in our faculty. We have to, because if you don't, who's going to drive the mission? It's not going to be me. It's going to be all of you. And you all rise to doing the hard things, because that's what you trained your life for. Same thing on this campus. So to me, it's the cultural change. It's the belief system. We're not here to do the easy. We're here to do the hard. And it's not impossible. We just haven't seen it yet. That's all. That to me is the number one challenge.
I mean, I couldn't agree more. I think you said it best, is that people get stuck in the status quo. And I always tell my residents and my students that the moment you're satisfied with how you did something, someone's going to do it better than you. And no matter how good you think you are, there's always a way to do it better. Faster, smaller incision, better outcome, quicker discharge home, less pain, whatever. And so I couldn't agree more that you definitely never want to get stuck in the rut of status quo. That's how everyone starts to pass you, because if you're not moving forward, you're definitely moving backwards. And so I couldn't agree more. And I think that you've created an incredible team here at UHealth. I only speak for my colleagues to know that I'm surrounded by people that want to advance the field each and every day, people that are hungry to make change, not just sit in the status quo, like you said.
Yeah, well said. And it's human nature. I've been around the world. I had the benefit of being in lots of big companies in my professional life. And to this day, I'm still the chair of Bank of New York, and I'm still on the board of Pfizer. So I'm around great things, but they all have the same issue: status quo, change. But what's fantastic here, Rick, is people like you are actually purpose driven, and your purpose is not wealth creation. See, in the for-profit world, the purpose is wealth creation. In the end, it's about wealth creation, okay? Not here. Here it's not. And that's why this is a beautiful thing, man, because this is really purpose-driven work, okay?
So I want to talk about another very important topic when it comes to any large corporation institution, and that's diversity, which is important for success at every level. Now, without affirmative action, how is ensuring diversity, acceptance, inclusion in the community? What other mechanisms do you have in place?
Yeah, so, and I'm a product of affirmative action, me personally. I came to this school through an affirmative action program because it was the rule of law in the 70s, and it was the rule of law up until recently. And the first thing that I've learned as a product of it and as a participant in it is that words sometimes, and you know this because you actually are a scientist in your own right, words evoke emotions in people, okay? And it's not even what the words mean, it's what they think they mean, okay? So there are just labels like affirmative action, like DEI, that just evoke reactions in people, okay? And if you can create a set of phrases that don't evoke reaction, then you can get back to doing the good work, okay? So affirmative action really, to me, was nothing more than providing an opportunity for people who otherwise wouldn't get an opportunity. That's what it was. See, when you say it that way, it doesn't sound so threatening, okay? So we've pivoted to a framing that I've seen works really well. So we can move away from the words and get back to the good deeds. And the framing we've pivoted to is belonging and inclusion. And people say, why? I say, because it's very simple to me. Diversity is a fact, just is. Inclusion is a choice, and belonging is an outcome. That's it. There's nothing terrible about any of those three things. Well, that makes sense to people. Now we got to get right back to doing the right things. So this program for endowed scholarships that we just talked about, that fits right in with that program. Because how are we going to get those students who maybe come from socioeconomic backgrounds that can't afford to have this opportunity? Okay, we'll go fundraise so we can have scholarship for them. Same thing with my faculty. I need a diverse faculty, diversity of thought, diversity of belief, not just ethnicity, race, and gender. I need a diverse faculty, diversity of experiences. The more experiences you have, I'm sure the different institutions you've gone through, and I know your resume, it's quite impressive. I'm sure you learn things that are different had you just been here your entire life. Okay, that's all. And I talk about diversity. See, I don't put the label DEI, I just say diversity. Everybody agrees, yes, diverse experience is important. So we're continuing. Now, when it comes to admitting students under the Supreme Court ruling for the undergraduate population, or the graduates, but mainly the undergrads, and obviously the medical school, now we have to go about it differently. We can't use the simpler techniques that we used before. Now we got to go person by person and find the qualified individuals who have diverse backgrounds, one by one, not across the board. That's all. The law allows you to do that. I just have to pick Rick because of Rick. And then I can't pick 10 more just because I picked you. No, I got to pick Mary and Bill, whoever, one by one. So guess what? We got to partner with organizations now that we didn't have to do before. We've introduced AI readers into our sophistication, so we can be a lot more sophisticated about reading about you and finding out about you from your words. And so through a combination of techniques, we're going to actually try to wind up in a better place than we were before. A better place without the distraction, and living with the essence of what those programs are really about, providing an opportunity for someone who otherwise would, like me, I got an opportunity. And that is generational changing now, Rick, because now my kids don't need that help. I wasn't going to go to college. It wasn't even in the recesses of my imagination until this program came along. My 4 kids, they all are going to go to college. And it changed my personal life, but it also influenced the rest of whatever becomes of the legacy of my family. It has a multiplier effect. It's not a singular transaction. And too often they think of the singular transaction, but it's a force multiplier. So we're just going to do it the right way. We'll always follow the rule of law. And I think we're going to actually wind up being better. We probably got a little lazy before, just naturally. We got used to how to do it. And now we're a little bit reinvigorated about it. What are we going to do? We got to do it differently. Let's think about it. I think some good is going to come of it. Probably not what was originally thought, but we're going to get a lot better because we're going to innovate. And you know this, science and how science works. You have hypotheses, right? You run trials and you learn, right? Same thing on this, my friend. I think we're going to actually get a lot better at it.
I mean, you're an example of someone who took an opportunity that was granted to him and you maximized it and you took advantage of it. And I think those are the type of students that you're looking for. You're looking for the students that are not just going to get an opportunity and sit back and say, wow, this is great, but they're going to say, wow, this is really life-changing and it's generational changing, like you said. And those are the students that you really want to capture. And it looks like it sounds like you guys are capturing them. Another hot topic, definitely hot last year, and I think it still is, freedom of speech on college campuses. Obviously, you want to encourage free speech, but you want to avoid incendiary conflicts. How is the university handling that fine line?
Yeah, it's a great question. And our old neighborhoods, New York, they've had different experiences, some of those schools than we've had down here. I think for me, anyway, as someone who only knows this institution really well, and I think for the large university, the institution has fundamentally, it hasn't actually stated it, it states it in small rooms, has followed a model of what is classically referred to as the principles of neutrality in academia, which basically says that the institution itself doesn't speak to things that are not centered to its core mission, doesn't speak out on all the issues. So let me give you a transaction. So if tomorrow, the new administration that's coming in, put your politics aside, but if they decided to take and tax endowments, today it is a minuscule tax of 1.7% on endowments. If they decide to move it to a capital gains rate of 20%, well, we would speak out against that because that would affect the actual institution itself. That's different than speaking out on a social issue, one way or another. What we want to do is create an environment where we can have debate, constructive conversation about those issues. So people can actually learn about those issues. Right now, what happens is they're just yelling at each other. No one's actually learning. So there's nothing wrong with rising the level of debate. It's quite healthy in my mind. And we have a really good program here on how we advance academic freedom inside the classroom. That's what that applies to. And freedom of speech on our campus. There are some processes. You can't do it wherever you want, whenever you want, in any circumstance, because then that disrupts the entirety of the institution. Okay. And we have an obligation. I've got 4,500 world-class faculty like yourself that have things you want to go get done. I've got 20,000 students. I got 15,000 other people, and I got 10 to 12,000 patients coming through the system at any day. We have a responsibility to all of them, okay? And we have to remind ourselves of that, and then have civil discourse, which is fine. So we have really good processes on this campus. Pat Whiteley, who leads this campus in downtown, is led by a different group, obviously. We don't discriminate against policy violations. You know, if you don't follow the policy, that's just a problem. On the other hand, we are setting up much more open environments where people can come to have debate, real, meaningful debate. And we do it all the time here. And I meet with the student organizations in particular and my faculty, and we are aligned. The faculty, the students, and the administration and the board, we have real alignment on what we want to do. We want to be neutral as an institution. We do. Only related to our core principles of the organization. And that's the University of Chicago model, quite frankly. All the institutions that had problems are now trying to get to that model, where they're neutral as an institution. Why is it? Because I personally represent the university, right? So why is it I should be allowed to decide what the position is? Me, one person. That's silly. The institution decides. And we're gonna create our environment for freedom of speech and academic freedom. We've actually done quite well. We have a great geography. That's helpful. We're an open campus, both downtown and here. You know it. But we live in a city that's on the rise, and we live in a city that's more international, that has a little bit larger view of the world. It's not as narrow. And we have policy that we've had in place since the Vietnam War. So since I was a student in the Vietnam War, what we call the ROC, and I'm pointing because I'm literally in the Ash building. I'm literally in the middle of campus. So that's not like a screensaver behind me. That's actually the campus outside. Okay. People ask me, is that a screensaver? No, that's the campus. That's the campus. But straight out there is the ROC. When I was a kid in 1974, the protesters at the end of the Vietnam War, that's where they did the protest, at the ROC. The ROC is our place for civil discourse and debate. We have a religion quadrant here on this campus where the 18 chaplains are represented, and that's organized regardless of faith. And Pat Whiteley and her team do a fabulous job. It's a little bit long-winded, but it's an important subject. And I want to make sure that our faculty always feel like they have academic freedom to teach. You teach your residents and your students. You have the ability to have civil discourse in the environments where you want to have it, as long as it's following the rules that we've ascribed. That's all. That's it.
I mean, I think you guys have done an amazing job tiptoeing that fine line, because it is a fine line no matter who you ask. And you want to hear both sides, but at the same point, it's got to stay peaceful. It can't be insulting and it can't be incendiary. And you guys have done a great job. Moving on to another hot topic, and that is mental health, which is, mental health issues, especially in college students, young adults, skyrocketing through the roof all over the country. What is the University of Miami doing to ensure wellness in its students?
Yeah, and this is an area where you as a scientist and a practicing clinician have far more expertise in terms of how it comes to be. But over the last 18 months, really 2 years, as it's to your right, as the level of incidents, because we wind up getting engaged in it when the event has occurred, not the things that lead up to the event. So we had 1 or 2 this week on the campus that would fit that moniker of mental well-being. So we've tried a bunch of things. One, we have ramped up our communication around the resources are available the minute the students come to campus. So at the beginning of every semester and at the end of every semester, we're having a complete program for all of our students on what is actually available. We have a program which includes counselors, facilities, privacy. One of the issues is always, I don't want anybody to know, I don't want anybody to understand. So we've created hotlines and programs. I have to tell you, the toughest thing that we have not been able to crack the code on, and at least in my vantage point, is preventative. When something happens, we're really good. But how do you deal with the journey that a person goes on to get to that breaking point, wherever it may be? And that's been tough to figure out, because even today, I dealt with one today. The parents had no idea, the friends had no idea, at least, and we're trying to learn, what were the signs that we could help somebody? So you got to do all the right things. We got to have wellness, we got to have balance, we got to have the right medical programs, we got to have the right work environment, the stress of work, right? Work-life balance, all the things, Rick, that you and I know about. But that's still not enough. That's still not enough. So I think it's in process for me. As a professional, it's in process for me. And I have 4 kids myself and 2 grandkids. And I know that worry I go through, and I'm sure you go through similar worries. But this is where we're going to rely on professionals to give us the best advice they can. And how can we do it? So it's not a lack of resources. It's not. It's not a lack of awareness and campaigns. It's not. But we haven't really cracked the code. And how do you figure it out sooner rather than later? Or what things could you have done differently? So one of the things we've evoked this year is every time we have one of these incidents and we're done with the acute matter and it's calmed itself down, to use a clinical term. How about that, man? I use the clinical term acute, an acute matter, right? And it's settled and it's calm. We normally would stop at that point. And what I've said is to our team, and it was really their idea, Pat's idea, let's go back and figure out, how did we wind up here? In the life cycle of this particular person, what happened in the journey to get here? Let's learn from that. Were there things we could have seen done earlier in the process, whether it's family, friends, or the institution? So we're trying to do things on the different floors of the dorms. A lot of this starts in the dorms for us, for undergraduates, or where they live. Usually doesn't happen in the settings where we are here. Usually happens in quiet, away from where everybody is. So we had a couple of incidents this week, and we've gone back, and there's a couple of things that the ecosystem could have done better. Between the parents, the friends, the institution could have done better. Better meaning help the person sooner in the process. And we're learning them, but we're a long way from being expert at it, my friend. A long way.
I think you guys are facing the same problem that faces every single university. So it's national, it's really global. And you're right, getting to the core of why mental health, which has always been a problem, is now really just an epidemic. It's everywhere you go, the anxiety disorders, depression, OCD, it's everywhere. And so it's a major problem. You guys have done a great job tackling it, but now you got to reduce the incidents, like you're saying, kind of get to the core. A hallmark of top institutions, which is what is not just helping the regional area, Miami, but looking globally and making an impact on global issues such as global warming and systemic racism, all the conflict in Ukraine and the Middle East. How important is it for you as president to make an impact on these global issues from and not just focus on Miami per se?
Yeah, I think it is this is part of being a great institution. You see, is having that perspective of purpose, that you have a higher calling like you do as a professional, right? I'm sure in your profession, there's nothing, assuming that it is ethically possible, legally possible, or regulatory, assuming there's nothing you wouldn't contemplate trying to do for the benefit of the patient or the science. I'm sure you want to win the race of discovery every day, okay? That's what we have to build into our ecosystem. And right now, the way we do those things is really episodic. in my mind. It really is driven by innovation. We have a group of faculty who want to participate in a certain thing. Okay, whether it's Ukraine, whether it's a natural disaster that happens somewhere, whether it's where you pick the subject that you describe. And we've got to figure out a way how to take those innovative ideas and scale them up to the institution. Scale them up. And that's the flip. Innovations are best done locally, meaning the individual, but at some point you got to prop it up and scale it to get the biggest benefit. And we are learning that. That to me is one of the critical steps to greatness, is being able to take what you do as an individual or a group of your colleagues do. Okay, well, how do we just naturally create those environments for people? We're not there yet as an institution. We are there as individuals. There's no doubt about that. But as an institution, we're not there. But for all the reasons you just described before, though, we've got the issues that we're dealing with. And so to me, that's one of the hallmarks of greatness. Can we get there? And can we be recognized for being that institution? And like I said, there's pockets of it right now. We got centers and institutes, particularly around national disasters and hunger around the world. In ophthalmology, we do some extraordinary things around the world, just getting people access to eyewear and access to eye exams. We do that. But all of it is kind of filtered around. It's not at the institutional level. And that's one of the elements of greatness, right? So you you thoughtfully asked about one of the elements of greatness. 5 years from now, we should be in a better place than we are today, but we will see. We will see. That's on me and the team to make sure that we institutionalize those things. So that's on me.
So the final question, because I know you're obviously swamped. You followed it in the footsteps of so many great presidents. You mentioned, Donna Shalala, obviously, and President Frenk, people that have really made a difference during their tenure. How will you leave your mark on the university, and what do you want your legacy to be?
Great question. So for me, I'm the seventh person to hold this quote unquote title of president. And in my professional life, I used to say all the time, because I really believe it, is that legacy ultimately is the institution and all of its stakeholders in a better place than we were when you started the journey. And I believe personally that if we as an institution feel like all of you who drive the mission, my faculty, created a sense of being valued and are empowered to be excellent in what you do every day, that is a life-altering culture to create greatness. When I first came to both systems, and I say both systems because it's fascinating, Rick, when the board asked me to help out, and I first came to Coral Gables with Julio, and I call him Julio, Dr. Frank Julio, but he and I are personal friends. When I first got here, it was, here comes a board guy. He's going to interfere with us. We have a terrible relationship with the board. All right. Now everybody says, isn't it great that I'm a person of the board because I have a great relationship with the board? Then I went to the health system, and when I got to the health system, they said, oh my God, here comes a Gables person. Okay. When I got to the health system, and then we did great things at the health system. And then when I came back to Gables, you know what they said? Here comes a health system person. Okay. My God, that's the journey. Okay. And if I can say, no, here comes a University of Miami leader. Okay. That would be an incredible legacy to leave behind. Go right back to the first question we talked about. That thing you got on that white coat, that's us, man. That's not me. That's not you. That is us. We are the you. It's not something out there. Without the health system, without Gables, without people like yourself, without the board, without our students and our research, we wouldn't be the you. You are the you. That's what I think about all the time. That to me would be something worthwhile. Whether it's tomorrow, a year from now, however long this lasts, if we all believe that and took that thing off, that would be spectacular.
What a tremendous legacy that would be. And you are well on your way in just a short tenure so far as president, but your history here at the university and your accomplishments really speak for themselves. I can tell you, as one of your faculty, it is very exciting to have you in charge, mainly based on your visions, very progressive. You're not afraid of change, like we talked about. And I think that even though the last 100 years has been amazing, I predict the next 100 years, especially under your tenure here now, is gonna yield amazing advancements. And so, congrats on everything you've done. Love your vision, and it's a pleasure working here with you.
Got it, my friend. It's us together. We're a team. Leadership is a team sport.
Absolutely, man. And we'll just throw up a U here. Just throw up a
Throw up
U.
to you.
Absolutely, man. You have an awesome weekend. Thanks for joining us.
Listen, have a great holiday if I don't see you before.
Absolutely. Happy holidays.
Take care, my friend.